Okay, hello. I have a little microphone on me, so that means I can do some walking around. I'm going to set myself a little stopwatch because I have ADHD. And it's very possible that I will talk and talk and talk. And we don't want to do that because I'm here to talk about how to create safe spaces. So thank you so much for the introduction. I don't really need to say much here. But I started my career in STEM as a project manager working on big technology transformation programs of work. And after doing a lot of coaching with teams and realizing, there might be something going on here, I decided to randomly, spur of the moment, for fun, with no desires to become an ADHD coach, to go and train as an ADHD coach. Where am I pointing the clicker? Oh, okay. All right. So we've brought down a little bit of a comfort check-in. Like I said, I'm ADHD. I've got a little fidget here. I'm going to be walking around because that feels good for my body. If you are a sort of person who likes to sit still, please do that. If you're a person who wants to step up, pace around, walk at the back, you might want to sit on the floor. I always sit on the floor at conferences. You do not need to stay seated for this particular talk. Please feel free to do what feels good for you. Okay, so 2020, I was at the peak, what some might say, the peak of my corporate career. I was the executive director of a national technology agency. I was running very, very big, complex programs of work. I had a big team. And then COVID happened and lockdown happened. And I had an ex-colleague who, no conversations had occurred before this, but they sent me an article that was signs of autism in adult women. And I read that list and I sobbed. I had never felt seen before that time. And I was like, whoa, okay, all right, there's something going on here. And I ended up getting a diagnosis, going and seeking that, because even though I had been dealing with mental health troubles my entire life, I had gone to many, many therapists. They'd never suggested, you might be autistic. I ended up getting diagnosed autistic with complex PTSD. And then my TikTok algorithm, I'm an early adopter, I'd been on it since 2019, it very quickly started to tell me that I also had ADHD. That one I was less sure about. I was like, surely I don't have ADHD, but no, I do. So that's when I started to do this ADHD coaching certificate. Then, that's right, looking over there. 2nd of May, 2023, not the best day that's happened in my life so far. I had a stroke. So just a little key tidbit, if you are possibly neurodivergent and you have ever considered yourself double jointed, maybe go speak to a doctor. There is some chances that if you have any sort of hypermobility, you could randomly have a stroke like I did from a vomiting bug. If you ever have a migraine that lasts for longer than 3 days, please go to the ER. I did not do that. And that is why it has taken me 2 years to get to the point where I can do a keynote presentation again. I became the most autistic that I've ever been. I became the most ADHD that I've ever been. As you can see on the MRI, I actually lost a whole 1/8 of my brain. It is a miracle that I'm here. Everything seems to work. Not quite the same as I was before, but we're okay. We're doing some things. But then a business was born. I was almost at the end of my ADHD coaching certificate. I'd been on this massive government technology program. That project, of course, got put on pause. And so I had a decision to make. But what am I going to do? Am I going to go look for a contract? Because I was almost a year into my stroke recovery. I was only able to work 10 hours a week. Anyway, I started coaching full time. And so it's been a year now, and I work solely with neurodivergent professionals, mostly senior leaders. And when I'm talking about neurodivergent, I am not just talking about autism and ADHD, although most of my clients, actually all of my clients, are one or the other or both. Because if you are autistic, depending on what research you read, 80% of autistic people have ADHD. If you have ADHD, again, depending on the research that you read, 50% of ADHDers also have autism. But my clients are from across the neurodiversity spectrum, with conditions that they are diagnosed with and conditions that they are not. A lot of my clients are not diagnosed with complex PTSD, but they have it. And there's other things that is not even on this list, like aphantasia. That actually makes it quite interesting. When you have an aphantasia person, that's someone who can't visualize in their mind, working with someone who has hyperphantasia, that's what I've got. So if I ask someone, oh, yeah, so what does that look like? And then I immediately see the panic in their face because they don't know what it looks like because they can't see anything. All right, so we're talking about psychological safety. So let's get a little bit of a definition going. So psychological safety is the belief that we can speak up with ideas, questions, concerns, and mistakes, and we won't suffer negative social or professional consequences as a result. What even is that? I know a lot of my clients, they've never felt that. They've never felt psychologically safe. So I like to describe things with visuals because I'm a visual person. So for me, I'm very, very fortunate. I have worked in some teams that have been very, very psychologically safe. Not everyone, but most people might understand the sensation of love, where you have this kind of feeling that's in your chest that just comes out. It emanates out of your being. For me, psychological safety is sort of similar to that, but it's more everywhere. It's like an energetic expansion that comes out of you. And when you're in a team with other people, they can feel those energies. We feed off these energies, and everyone starts to be able to speak up, and there's no silly questions. We can brainstorm. We're doing great work, and it feels really nice. What is neurodivergent psychological safety? So this is something that I made up. You won't find this anywhere. This is just for this talk today. But I'm defining neurodivergent psychological safety as the belief that our authentic neurological expression, whether through movement, communication style, sensory needs, or processing differences, is accepted, and we can interact without fear of negative social or professional consequences. So it's similar, but it's different. It's nuanced. It's more about safe to be, rather than can you talk and do work and be awesome at work. The unfortunate reality that I see with my clients, that they're not experiencing that in the workplace. We have deep-seated ableism. That is just how it works. Even if you are neurodivergent, you will be experiencing internalized ableism. I know. After my diagnosis back in 2020, I had to unpack a lot of things that I had internalized and did not realize. And that was a lot to deal with. We tend to have a feeling that disability is a moral failure. Even today, on my way over here, when I start to rush, my executive functions everything just falls apart. I left my phone at home. I'm in the Uber and I'm like, oh my God, I've left my phone at home. And then I could see the Uber driver in the mirror. He's like, oh, and he's so annoyed at me. And I'm like, sorry, babes, I've got ADHD and I'm paying you. So please just go help me get my phone. But we feel this. We internalize these feelings. And what I see a lot of my clients is isolation and bullying. And unfortunately, my clients are almost all late diagnosed. So diagnosed in their 30s and 40s, some in their 20s. But they get this very, very affirming diagnosis. They go to their boss and they say, hey, I'm autistic, or I'm ADHD, or I'm dyslexic. I need some reasonable accommodations. And they think that that would be reasonable because the word reasonable is in there. But I have had clients whose managers have just flat out said, no, not interested in any training around neurodiversity, not interested in helping them create sustainable patterns at work because they keep burning out. And then they start masking even harder. And masking is bad for us. It makes us sick. This is when we pretend and we try to perform neurotypicality. That can lead to burnout, that can lead to chronic health issues. So at my worst, in the lead up to my worst burnout, 2018, I had such severe pain in my body that I could not stand for 10 minutes. I could not lie down for 10 minutes. I was in the worst pain of my life and no one could figure out what was going on. I started developing all these allergies. I ended up with an autoimmune disorder, and I was very, very ill. And that was because I was masking. I was trying so hard to be quote unquote normal. And I was also failing at it, to be honest. And unfortunately, job loss. So I work with a lot of people in corporate Australia, and neurodivergent people, when redundancy rounds come, we tend to be the first on the chopping block. And a lot of my clients actually just get pushed out of their organisations. So our nervous systems are not feeling safe. When I was in my worst burnout, in the lead up before there was a click, I was in a boardroom and a snap happened in my brain and I knew I had to leave straight away, immediately. All of those signals in my body where I had been having a lot of headaches, a lot of pain, I developed IBS. I would go to the toilets and cry and didn't know why I was doing that. I would get heart palpitations. I would be dizzy. I was feeling faint at work. I ignored all of that for a year, and that was in its most severe crisis point. And then I had a click in my brain, and it switched off. And that was 6 months that I was lying on my bed. Couldn't leave the house at all. Couldn't function, couldn't clean, couldn't cook, couldn't socialise, nothing. And I'm not the same as I was before. So when I was in the office, there was a buzzing sensation in my body that I was just pretending that I wasn't hearing or noticing, but it was there. So when we're talking about psychological safety and we're talking about neurodivergence, we're trying to make a really big jump. So we've got these two people on the right. They are feeling psychologically safe. They're in this team that's been working really well. You've got this guy on the left. He's neutral. He's not feeling psychologically safe, but there's not anything else going on. And then we have this neurodivergent person on the left who is in nervous system distress. So we are trying to make a really big jump. We're trying to move through physical and mental neutrality into psychological safety, but not realizing that we have people who are living with dysregulated nervous systems because of the way that our organisations exist, the offices that we are in, and the way that we just live our lives, unfortunately, most of the time. So, psychosocial hazards. Rachel did mention that. I mean, look, this is the main cause of a lot of dysregulation that I see in my clients. So job demands. In the lead up to my worst burnout, I was working 16 hours a day for 1 year and traveling every week. I was doing 2 jobs, and even though I was saying, hey, I'm really stressed, I don't think I can keep doing this, no one listened until I was medically unable to do it. So, having a clear understanding of job demands and being able to figure that out in the moment, that would have been helpful. Poor support and poor role clarity. A lot of the people that I work with, they are twice exceptional. They are gifted, they are very intelligent, and they're also disabled. They're also neurodivergent. And so because they are intelligent, managers are like, throw them in the deep end. They'll figure it out. They're smart. But that's different to executive functioning. Intelligence and executive functioning are not the same thing. Just because you are smart doesn't mean that you are going to figure out, without anyone telling you how to do it, how to prioritize a big project, how to break down a list of complex tasks, how to get started, how to finish. These are things that we have to cognitively learn. Lack of role clarity. So I have so many clients whose managers might give them quite a vague job description and they're expected to just do it. That leader has no strategy, no clear strategy. They might think the strategy is clear, but there's a lot of interpretation that's required. And when you're autistic, interpretation, it's not necessarily our strong suit. And also organisational change management. Autistic people, we are not great at change generally, but when that change management inside an organisation is bad, that is particularly an awful situation for us. But what I see in my client is a whole bunch of other things that are very, very specific to being neurodivergent. So, sorry, there's someone trying to call me. So what I see in my clients, the first one is probably just a lot of sensory overload. So you can see today I'm wearing some baggy clothes. Now, I did not dress like this before I got my autism diagnosis. I was trying to be the professional corporate person, and everything I wore was super uncomfortable, and that made me feel very, very distressed all day at work. The fluorescent lights in the office. I worked in open plan offices all of my career, people talking, people interrupting. There was just a lot going on. Now, cognitive load. So I mentioned some things about executive functions before. Going back to ADHD. ADHD is, here's a stereotype, we're very good in fast-paced, reactive jobs because we don't have to prioritize. We don't like prioritizing unless, sometimes we might be good at it. But if you've also got autism and ADHD, which I think is going to be very common to see both in the next few years, because you are only able to be diagnosed with both of those conditions for just 12 years now. Before that, you could only have one. So there are a lot of people who might have been diagnosed as kids back in the 80s or 90s or 2000s who might be diagnosed with ADHD, but they're actually both. So you might have ADHD where you're very good at reactive, fast-paced jobs, but you've also got the autism in there that doesn't like change. And then if you keep working at that pace over time, that can lead to burnout. So energy and time mismatches, again, going back to stereotypes, these stereotypes exist because I generally see them as true. A lot of my clients, they will have these cognitive peaks in the evening. Suddenly it's like 7 to 9 p.m. and the creativity happens. They're just like, boo, 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 buzzing, everything's going. Now, my mum, her favourite time to vacuum was midnight, which was not the best when I had exams in the morning, but, it got done, so she worked with it. But what happens is if you have these creative cognitive peaks in the evening, and then you also have sleep disturbances, which I see in all of my clients, and then you've got to be in the office at 8:30 in the morning, you keep doing that for long enough and you are going to burn out. Not that you're at risk of burnout, you probably are going to burn out. Now, unmet physiological needs. So we tend to have a disconnect between our mind and our body. A lot of reasons for that, partly because we can feel the buzzing and we're like, okay, I don't know what this is, okay, but I've just got to get through it. And so you just ignore those signals. And the more you ignore those signals, because you don't want to feel them, they feel bad. The more that you do that, the less able you are to actually notice them. So my clients, again, super intelligent, very, very gifted people with very, very fancy jobs, don't remember to go to the bathroom, don't know that they're hungry, don't know that they need to drink water, don't know that they need to rest. And so these basic physiological needs, and I'm going to say quote unquote basic because they're basic for neurotypical people, they are just unmet for a long time. And my clients will come to me and say, I need to be a better leader. It's like, well, did you go bathroom today? So physical and health-related stresses. So I had a stroke and suddenly everything just got off the charts. So when my clients go through these major health problems or life transitions, so like divorce, a marriage, having a baby, maybe starting study, getting promoted, having a child, or I think I said that, just any sort of big life transition, that's when executive dysfunction is going to flare up. So this energetic expansiveness that I was talking about, where you just kind of like feel the energy. When you walk into a room and people have been arguing and you can feel it in the air and you're not even looking at people's faces. We feel these energies. So when people have these internalized feelings around disability is a moral failure, this person is awkward, this person says wrong things, we're feeling that. And that makes us dysregulated as well. And neurodivergent people tend to be hired by neurodivergent managers, even if those managers don't know that they're neurodivergent. So if you are, just generally speaking, a neurodivergent person, there's chances that you experience a lot of nervous system dysregulation. If you are unidentified and undiagnosed, you're probably a very, very dysregulated person, probably very emotionally reactive. You probably will like scattergun. You'll be like, task. Okay, here we go, strategy. Okay, and then you run away and you're like, oh. And then everyone's just in your wake going, what is even going on? Again, we feel those energies. But we've got some pretty low-hanging fruit to be able to solve some of these problems. So 61% of people do not feel safe to disclose at work. That's quite high. Only 41% of people feel comfortable supporting their neurodivergent colleagues. But 97% of people say that they can feel safe with small acts. We're not talking about fundamentally changing the world, spending heaps of money, changing all of the fluorescent lights, although I definitely think we should be doing that. But we're talking about small things, and a lot of them are free. And a lot of those things help other people. They help parents who might have to go and do school runs. They help people who are sick, who have to just be off for a few days. So when we're talking about traditional psychological safety, we are focusing on work outcomes. We want to make the thing good. We want to make it good together. When we're talking about communication, we're talking about people are safe. They can say that there's a problem, and that's going to be okay. We have open channels of communication. We're focusing on how well our teams are cohesive. Are they working well together? And leaders are encouraging, because psychological safety starts with the team. It's a team-in kind of vibe, that you'll have your leaders who will be like, yep, cool, go do that psychological safety stuff, and then you've got the good work outcomes because they want the good work outcomes first. But they're encouraging you. But interestingly, we're not considering comfort at all. I'll come back to this one. But ultimately, it's productivity. Capitalism, woo! But neurodivergent psychological safety, again, it's nuanced. So we are focusing on nervous system safety. Because if you have neurodivergent people in your team, and I can tell you today at a STEM conference, you do. If we focus on nervous system safety, the work outcomes will happen. Because if you have these gifted, twice exceptional people doing amazing, complex, interesting work, when they feel good in their bodies, the work just comes. We're moving from open channels of communication to multimodal. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say we're in a boardroom and we're talking, talk, okay, question, answer, cool. Everyone is able to respond. But that doesn't really work when you might have autistic people who might need a little bit more time to process. And I see that with a lot of my clients who do need extra time to process, and they have delayed processing. So often I would, something would happen at work, and then a week later I'll be like, oh, they were bullying me. Or someone will ask me a question, and then at 3 o'clock in the morning I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, I've got the coolest idea. It just comes later. So with my clients, when I'm coaching them, I encourage all of my clients, especially if I ask a question that they don't have an answer to, ponder on it, go have a think, and send me an email. Now, I don't actually need the email. The email is not for me. I don't need the answer, and I don't need their solution. The email is to give them the opportunity to have that delayed processing time, and the process of just sitting down and writing the email gets their thoughts kind of in order for them. And then once they write all that down, then they know they have the answer and they're really comfortable with what they've got. So we're moving from team cohesion to embracing differences, because our teams are not full of the same people. Well, hopefully not. But we need to embrace them rather than just assuming that the team's just going to work. We are actively expecting differences. And leaders have an active role. They are not just saying, cool, go do that psychological safety stuff. They're modeling things. I know my jump from individual contributor as a project manager all the way up to executive director, that was a really, really big jump. And that first jump into leadership, especially as an ADHDer, that was huge. I had to learn a lot of skills that no one had told me how to do them. And I needed to learn through observing, and I like to people watch. But it's really helpful when people are modeling. So if we're talking about boundaries, how do you set boundaries? How do you push back in a way that doesn't damage a relationship at work? How do you create work-life balance? How do you manage your time? These are not things that we learn in school. They're not things that we probably learn in university, and they're not things we're learning at work. That's why my clients come to me. And we're also intentionally designing for comfort. So if you are in a all-day meeting, maybe you're doing a brainstorm, you're in a big meeting room. Okay, so things that I would say don't do. Don't go for 4 hours without having breaks, which I see people do quite regularly. If you have lunch, don't eat it at the table. Don't order in. Get up and leave. ADHDers, we have reduced blood flow in the prefrontal cortex, and things that increase the blood flow in the prefrontal cortex is movement. Which is why I am pacing, trying very slowly not to move too far or fall off the stage, because it actually helps my brain to work. Ultimately, we're talking about sustainable productivity. Because when we think about sustainability, we have these gifted people who are at increased risk of burnout, and we're thinking about how do we set up a marathon. We're not sprinting. A lot of organizations, everything's very fast. It's a fake capitalism demand for speed. And when we are working in that way long term, we can become very, very ill. All right, so some tips. Managing overwhelm and energy. So I talked about your nervous system, and what does that mean to attune your nervous system? So when I was a manager, I remember having people come to me and they'd have a problem, they'd go, I need some help with this thing, and immediately I'm in problem-solving mode. Problem solving. How do I get them to answer this problem? But when you sit with that and you sit with them and you're not trying to go anywhere, you're not trying to lead them anywhere, and you're not hoping that they get anywhere on your behalf in the time that you have, like I said, the clients that I work with, they are gifted. And I trust my clients that they will always come up with their solution that is going to work for them. And me having that faith and holding the space for them to be able to do that is really, really affirming. But what I have to do as a coach is I have to, in a session, I am body scanning. I'm noticing, okay, what's going on? Okay, am I being pulled forward? Because as soon as I feel like I'm physically being pulled forward, I know that I'm starting to get into problem-solving mode. And this is over the past few years since my diagnosis, I've really tried to get the connection between my mind and my body to become a lot more obvious. So when I get into problem-solving mode and I'm in a call with a client, I know that's going to be terrible. They are going to have a bad experience. And I would say my worst coaching sessions are when I have been thinking, how can I solve this problem for them? Sometimes my clients will just surprise me. I actually don't know what they're saying sometimes. And I'm just sitting there, I'm just listening. I'm listening for keywords. I'm listening for themes. And because their thinking is not the same as my thinking, I can't assume that they're going to be communicating in a way at all times that makes 100% sense to me. Sometimes I will ask for clarification, and sometimes I'm just going to keep letting them go, interrupt them if they need interrupting at certain moments, but I will contract to do that. So creating a space where two people who have different communication styles can communicate together requires me to be in tune with my nervous system as a leader. So structured prioritization discussions. My clients come to me when their workload gets too much and they don't know what to do, and there's no one around them that's helping them. So there's a lot of prioritization frameworks that we can use. Everyone loves an importance, Eisenhower matrix, importance, urgency. But what do you do when everything's urgent and important? How do you figure that one out? And that's where we do a lot more just conversational. I make up frameworks on the spot. We'll find, okay, all right, so they talked about this, but actually they're talking about energy and not talking about urgence and importance. And so I'm just looking for things. And so I will help them figure out how to prioritize in those moments. But so many organizations do not have any practical methods for when people are dealing with overwhelm. What do? And if you are neurodivergent and you struggle with, right, that is a timer. There we go. If you are neurodivergent and you struggle with understanding social cues, if those processes are not written down, so where it says, if overwhelmed, do A or B or C, you're just going to sit there and just your nervous system is going to be buzzing and you're just going to be stressed and overwhelmed. So that might be having a weekly or a fortnightly reprioritization meeting. It might be a daily prioritization meeting, just a little 15-minute stand-up. It won't be reporting back what you've done, but it's like, okay, how do we need to tweak this to get things be better? And scripts. Like, okay, so if someone comes to me and they want me to present it in STEM tomorrow, I am presenting in STEM tomorrow. Thursday, I know that I'm not going to do that. And I know I have scripts to be able to say, okay, all right, well, I can't do this then, but I could do this in X time. That has taken me years to be able to learn what those words are in the right order to be able to say it so someone doesn't give you a funny look, and also to feel comfortable saying it. Because to push back when your nervous system is dysregulated, that is so stressful. To push back when it's not is stressful. So when people know what are the things to say to get the best outcomes, that's really helpful. And I really encourage time blocking. So many of my clients do not time block. In fact, I would say before they come to me, I'm going to make up a number, 95% of my clients do not time block at all. And their entire workday is just open to whoever pops a calendar invite into their calendar. And that is no way to get work done, because people do not care about your time. They do not know what you are trying to achieve. And in fact, they're probably specifically not interested. They just want to get your time. So having time blocks where you can actually sit down and do deep thinking work, do collaboration work is really, really helpful. Oh, notification. Okay, you start a new job. You got Teams. You might have Slack. You might have WhatsApp. You have email. You've got people, physical people coming up to your desk. And worse, you might have someone sending you a Teams notification, and then 2 minutes later they come over and say, hey, have you read my Teams notification? No, I have not. I'm sitting here and I'm stressed and everything buzzing. So one thing I have done with a lot of organizations is to go in and help them figure out how to audit these notifications. How do you actually set up communication channels to have intention? So what do you use Teams for? If you're using it for everything, then it's probably not the right way to use it, because how do you actually go back and search for the important things? If you are using it to just see if people are available, okay, that could work. But if that's not specified, then people might find that stressful. And a lot of people, especially younger people who are individual contributors, they don't know that you can turn them off and no one's going to tell you off for doing it. So they have to have permission to do this. And a lot of my clients, even when I suggest, hey, you know what, I'm going to suggest that maybe you only check your email 3 times a day and you decide what times work for you. That if you have Teams, that maybe you are not always available on Teams. That can be very, very uncomfortable. That's not nice for them, unless their manager has said, hey, I think we should audit the notification so that we can actually have more focused time to do work. And how available do we want to be? Someone sends you an email, how quickly do you have to respond to that? Someone sends you a Teams message, how quickly do you have to respond to that? Because my clients are sitting at their desks, panicking, thinking that everything is urgent and they have to respond to everything. And I have clients who are trying to achieve inbox zero. Now, if there's anyone here who is keen for inbox zero, I'm really sorry to tell you, but I do think it's not a good thing. especially if you're neurodivergent, that is just causing anxiety. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got as a leader, I was an executive leader, went to my CEO like, oh my God, like, how do you do it? There's so many emails. And he said, you just have to get used to things, your task list never being done. And that fundamentally changed how I approach work. Because if you can't get everything done, you don't stretch, the work doesn't stretch into every waking hour. You have to prioritize the work to fit into your working time. My clients tend to work a lot of overtime. Now, ideally, we would have sensory areas. I would love that. I would love to see that in organizations because they can be used for people who have migraines. They can be used for people who might need to pray. They can be used for people who might need to breastfeed or pump at work. So these things help everyone, not just neurodivergent people. I just did that for myself. I just took a little breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Now, I did not used to do that. I used to, I just breathe through the top of my chest and through my neck to the point that I actually have on one side, my muscles on my neck are like obviously thicker than the other side. And I used to have a lot of panic attacks. Thank God I don't have panic attacks like that anymore. But I didn't know how to breathe. I also didn't know I was breathing. I'm going to call it differently. I'm not going to call it wrong, but it was wrong for me because I did not feel good at all. So when I'm working with a client and I can start to see that they're getting agitated or I can start to see they're getting activated, and it wasn't obvious to me at the start, but I can see it now because I'm trying to be more attuned with my own nervous system and their nervous system. I can just see energy start to rise and the electrons in their body are just vibrating a little bit more. And I will do some contracting in the moment and just say, hey, I'm noticing XYZ. I'm noticing that you're a little bit activated. Would this be a good moment for us to take a breath together and just see if we can just bring that down a little bit? Now, if you're a leader and this is new, that might be a very uncomfortable thing to start doing. So when we start talking about mental health and we're really practical about it, these are the things that help business. These are the things that help employees. And these are the things that create neurodivergent psychological safety. Movement breaks. Oh, my clients, they are keyboard catting. Start at 8, finish at 5, keyboard cat, no pee, no food, no breaks. And they just do that all day. And then they wonder why they're stressed. So encourage people to get up and move around and model those self-care practices that you're giving for yourself so then they know that they exist. All right. I would love to see written agendas in the meeting invite, in the calendar for every meeting. That helps everybody because people then can say no if it's actually not something that's going to be that helpful to them. And recording and transcribing, I know some people are very anti that, but there is a tool called Fathom that I have found is the best. I definitely recommend that. Now, we all have different energy differences. You're going to have night owls, you're going to have early morning people, you're going to have people with male hormones, people with female hormones. There's a big connection between female hormones and dopamine. So we're all working on different cycles, but we're all trying to work as a team. But when we start to talk about these things, like when do you work at your best? What does that mean? When do we want to have this big meeting? Having meeting-free days. I really, really resisted that for so long. But now every Wednesday, I only do deep work, creative work, strategic work, no meetings at all, and it has been a game changer. And in an ideal world, we would have resources. We would have employee resource groups for neurodiversity because people don't know how to get help. They don't know help exists. There is a fund called the Employee Assistance Fund that every person with a diagnosed disability, neurodivergent condition or mental health condition can access $1,642.99 in a 12-month period to go towards coaching. And almost all of my clients start with that, so they put that towards a coaching package. I would love to see training for leaders. I have scoped up so many training programs in the past year, and organizations just don't want to spend money on it. They don't see it as important. But the leaders are the ones who are responsible for bringing the psychological safety inside teams by modeling these things. How to handle disclosures, that would be great too. Now, I'm probably a little bit over time, but I'm just going to give you a short one thing to do. Just notice what's going on in your body. When you're in a meeting and someone says something or does something that maybe just doesn't seem right or expected to you, just notice what's going on in your body. High chances that is some ableism that's just starting to peek its head up. Start to model things and put it to the team. If you need to change something about how a team works, don't decide it for them. Ask them how to do it. Because I don't know if I have any time left, but if there is, I'm happy to take questions.
Hi. So thank you very much. I believe this is from the heart, very, very important work that very few people are actually aware of. I say that as someone diagnosed with ADHD and autism myself quite recently too. So I relate a lot to some of the things you've mentioned. A lot of the things you've mentioned, actually. My question is for advocacy. From the bottom up, as us, neurodivergent people, how do you think it's best to approach advocating for ourselves? I'll put it very bluntly. I've been through a very difficult process related to discrimination in both neurodiverse and gender diverse fronts quite recently. I remember spending months talking with my mental health, psychiatric, accessibility services teams privately and from my university. For context, I'm a PhD student, so I had a one-to-one relationship with my primary supervisor that was kind of important for my project. And after crafting letters, recommendations, not too dissimilar to what you've just shown here, lists of tools that can be used, improvements on the workplace. I remember very vividly, and I quote what my supervisor said at that point. These people do not know what a PhD is. These people do not know what a PhD requires. Essentially implying, okay, if you are doing something like this, something high caliber, high pressure, then these accommodations, so to speak, are an interruption, are, against meritocracy, against productivity. Ultimately, that relationship completely broke down, and, no amount of advocacy really stopped that. So I'm curious how to approach it, how to prevent things like this from happening, especially in circumstances where the power imbalance is so great.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
Probably not going to like the answer. You can't make those things not happen, because if you're trying to advocate for yourself as someone who doesn't see that as important, you can't force that to happen. I think I encourage my clients to focus on safety. So for advocating for themselves, do you actually need these things to survive, or are you able to word it in a way that makes it clear that it might be around, I need these things to be at my best versus I am autistic and I need XYZ for you to understand that I'm autistic, because a lot of people, it's like that jump. It's a really big jump. And I encourage my clients to focus on, okay, what's the best result for you here? If you ask for this, is there a risk that the relationship might break down? And if there is, then maybe it's actually finding another job. Maybe it is putting up with things that make you feel not good. Or maybe it is taking the risk and asking for what is right for you and seeing what happens. Unfortunately, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen until we open our mouth sometimes and see the response. I would encourage people to work through those things with someone who is neurodivergent themselves, because they can best advise you. Working with like a neurotypical therapist is probably not going to be that helpful. But yeah. I hope that answers your question a little bit, but I would focus on safety and expect that sometimes it might not go the right way.
Thank you.
I wonder if you've got any insights you can share about how we can tackle structures as managers or supervisors when we want to introduce such accommodations, how we can tackle the kind of systemic issues that we might be encountering in the workplace, even around things like if you're sensitive to fluoros, putting a desk light in, and then, somebody's ultimately going to say, oh yeah, but that hasn't been tested by our electrical, like that, you're not allowed to use desk lamps, kind of things. Like, how do you, is there, have you got any insights into how those issues can be tackled?
Well, it's a challenge, because if the senior people aren't interested in tackling those systemic issues, then for us neurodivergent people to try and address those things, we're just going to butt up against the fact that they are not that involved or invested. I would also maybe, and look, I probably am going to speak out of turn here, but ask for forgiveness rather than permission. Honestly, it works. I know as an autistic person, I always ask for permission because that's the rule. But it turns out that you ask permission, you get said no. At least if you ask for forgiveness, you might have had it for a week before someone told you off. But I don't know, when it comes to like spheres of control, we can't control everything. We can only control things within our little limit. And hopefully we are able to find organisations where there are people who are senior who are starting to think that these things might be important. Again, especially in STEM, I know the stat that Rachel said before, 1 in 5 people are neurodivergent. That's the general population. When you're talking about STEM, I'm going to throw out a number and I'm going to say you probably have teams that are 100% neurodivergent and you don't even know, because that's what I experienced after my diagnosis and going through this learning journey of becoming the ADHD coach. There are so many people who are neurodivergent and don't know. But hopefully we can find those places and find people who are more open to it, because we can't change the world. We can try though. Oh, I did have one more thing. Just a reminder. Oh, flicker turned off. There we go. Job Access Network. Please take a photo of that. I will send out a PDF after today to add to if you have maybe a brand new employee resource group of how to access this. But it's a fantastic service and I really encourage people to take advantage of it. Thank you.